So let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
Certainly does establish that this country, whose president was being told at the White House that he didn't have any cards to play, that he apparently has quite a few cards to play, including this daring attack. And who knows what else the Ukrainians, who have proved pretty ingenious, may have up their sleeves.
Brilliant and possibly game-changing, massive genius drone attack in Russia by Ukraine still has Russian society paralyzed in paranoia. They're checking every truck, every driver, wondering if one is filled with more drones to attack more planes, more trains, and more bridges.
Number 2.
Mr. Solomon stated that he had been planning this attack for a year, and he acted because he hated what he called the Zionist group.
That is Bishop Gruel over in Boulder, Colorado, wishing he could have killed more. That's what this flame-throwing terrorist said after being arrested in Boulder for his anti-Semitic attack on Israeli supporters. Why this has to stop and why some think that it all started on college campuses.
Number 1.
Another item high on our list to begin work on in June is a rescissions package the White House intends to send Congress this week. The administration has identified a number of wasteful uses of taxpayer dollars, and we will be taking up this package and eliminating this waste.
4 weeks to make it work. That's what Trump and Thune have to do. Draft and pass. As troublesome senators visit the White House Monday, along with Leader Thune, we're going to talk about hurdles and the House. Keep in mind, too, that Senator Thune is going to be joining the Tuesday show. Now, what is in the big, beautiful bill that's controversial? Well, they say there's not enough spending to be cut, except if you talk to Susan Collins. She'll say it's just fine. Don't cut Medicaid at all. Well, they're not cutting Medicaid. What they're doing is adding work requirements to it, making sure illegals are not benefiting from it, and also making sure that you are getting Medicaid, which is state aid. You are getting it one state at a time, wiping out that fraud, which is just widespread. But if you touch Medicaid, people feel it's a third rail for the midterms and for the elections. I think you got to make some bold moves. People say also that the big bill adds money to the deficit. Some say no. If you look at what the CBO says, they see the economy growing at 1.8%. We've never had 10 years of anemic growth of 1.8%. If you grow the economy 2.5 or 3, which you could say with the trade deals and this bill is possible, there is not going to be any deficit, any money added to the deficit. But you can't convince Rand Paul of that. Cut 5.
The bill increases the debt ceiling by $5 trillion. This will be the largest increase in the debt ceiling ever in our history, and we've never raised the debt ceiling without actually meeting that target. So you can say it doesn't directly add to the debt, but if you increase the ceiling $5 trillion, you'll meet that. And what it does is it puts it off the back burner, and then we won't discuss it for a year or two. So I think it's a terrible idea to do this.
So Thune insisted he still wants to get the package off Capitol Hill on July 4th. I don't think that he plans on getting Rand Paul. I like what Ron Johnson says. Senator Johnson says the package is too big. I want to get back to pre-pandemic spending, and I'm going to work to get it passed. Rather than too much is in the deficit. I don't want it. Tom Massey, Rand Paul, are they getting to work? Donald Trump picked up the phone yesterday, invited everyone to the White House, Ron Johnson, Rand Paul, Rick Scott, that have been critical for different reasons of what the House is handing over. And he doesn't get into who's right or wrong. He said, what do we need to do to get this passed? Understand what the stakes are. Russ Vought, who plays a critical role in making this all work, OMB director, explained that we are going to have critics, including Elon Musk. But then he goes out of his way to define why they're wrong. Cut 9.
I love Elon. This bill doesn't increase the deficit or hurt the debt. In fact, it lowers it by $1.4 trillion. And so when you assume the extension of the president's tax relief from 2017, this budget or this bill, and it's really a reconciliation bill. It's not really a budget bill. It is using a budget process. This is a $1.4 trillion over 10 years deficit reduction. It's $1.6 trillion in mandatory savings. Obviously, we have a little bit of spending in there as well for border and defense. But that is the biggest mandatory savings package that we have seen since the 1970s, 1997. It's very historic.
He'll go deep on it. And I just think that if you look at what President Trump has done with his team, when it comes to these issues of explaining, They don't need preps. They don't need to be get talking points. They live it. Russ Vought lives this stuff. You don't need to. You can't catch him. You can say whatever you want about him. You're not going to catch him. And if you have Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, you're not going to catch him in a negative situation because he understands exactly what he's doing. Reince Priebus, former chief of staff of the president, was on in hostile territory for ABC, a role that Chris Christie used to play, but now he's so vehemently anti-Trump, they kind of put him in just a guest role, but he's still a great guest. Here's Reince Priebus on the truth about Medicaid. And why does it matter? If you cut Medicaid, you lose Josh Hawley. Why? Most of the people in his Missouri, in his state, they said are rural. They need Medicaid. Question is, if they're able-bodied people, why do they need it? Are they impoverished? Is it something they can't work their way out of? And why isn't the state paying for it? Cut 12.
But you cannot sit here and tell me that 30 more million people on Medicaid and us and the Republicans saying we want able-bodied people who are mostly in the expanded pool of Medicaid recipients to check in with the federal government twice a year is going to cause people to die? We're not talking about elderly. Yes. No, you are wrong. We are not talking about elderly people. We are not talking about people that have kids under 7 years old. We are talking about people who should probably start looking for a job.
And that's what people don't want to hear, but a lot of it is the facts. So, and what Barack Obama did, telling everyone on Medicaid, we'll pay the federal government if you just expand it. So the federal government writes the check, governors look good, so suddenly people have insurance, they get reelected, they go out of office, Obama leaves, and now you got this huge federal bill. Wow, I don't know why we have a deficit. Well, because you're paying Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, and the president said, I don't want to touch any of it. So that leaves only 1/3 of the budget, if that, in order to debate. So you got $1 trillion for the defense budget. That's an additional $140 million. And you have more money for the border, including $46 billion for the wall. We'll see where that goes. This is going to be a big week in terms of the economy and trade. President of the United States is going to talk to President Xi this week. He also said you got till tomorrow to make your offer. EU, Japan, India, Vietnam, major countries that want to redo trade relationship. We demand they redo their trade relationship and balance it out with us. So that's Wednesday to get a deal. So I think the president wants to be in the Oval Office cutting some deals. And he wants to do it. Japan was there last week. What is the holdup? I hear it's over cars. So, about the tariffs, you want them lifted. And, Japan is really upside down when it comes to debt. They have a productive economy, but financially it's not working out. They have massive stagflation and they have massive debt over there. So they don't want to add more to the cars. So Scott Bessent was asked to take on a lot of people, including Jamie Dimon, who said this over the weekend. He might be the most respected banker in the country. Cut 29.
I just got back from China last week. They're not scared, folks. There's notion they're going to come bow to America. I wouldn't count on that. And when they have a problem, they put 100,000 engineers on it, and they've been preparing for this for years.
Well, the problem is they're also violating the deal. What they told us in Geneva was we're going to stop we're not going to hold back any rare earth material which is for our tech center, for our military. Said, okay. Well, they did. And that's the problem. So already they're not living up to the deal they cut in Geneva. Here's the president, cut 28.
Well, they did. They violated a big part of the agreement we made. If you read that whole statement, I was very nice to them. I helped them because they were in trouble with the stoppage of a massive amount of business. But I'm sure that I'll speak to President Xi and hopefully we'll work that out. But yeah, there's a violation of the agreement.
Yeah, so that's the problem. So it's up for them to have a conversation this week. The markets will be directly affected, I am sure. And about Jamie Dimon predicting things, he's worried about the bond market tearing up. He's worried about he's worried about China. This is what Scott Bessent says. He's known him for a while. Cut 30.
So again, I've known Jamie a long time, and for his entire career, he's made predictions like this. Fortunately, none of them have come true. That's why he's a banker, a great banker. He tries to look around the corner. One of the reasons I'm sitting here talking to you today and not at home watching your show is that I was concerned about the level of debt. So the deficit this year is going to be lower than the deficit last year, and in 2 years it will be lower again. We are going to bring the deficit down slowly.
There you go. And that's his approach. That's what he said when he was our guest. He's been on about 10 times on radio when no one knew him. He was in here saying that's his main focus. He's worried about income disparity. And he's a billionaire, right? Self-made billionaire. Guy didn't have any money. Been working since he was 9 years old. Success story. Obviously extremely bright. Self-made billionaire who said, I want to work for $200,000 to fix the country. That's pretty much why you want people to go into office, don't you? So let's go to Senator Majority Leader John Thune. Senator Thune, welcome back.
Thanks, Brian. Good to be with you.
Senator Thune, could you bring us inside? I understand the president asked you to come to the White House yesterday. Josh Hawley was also, Rick Scott, Senator Ron Johnson. These are some of the people that are very critical to a degree of the bill that came out of the House. What was it like?
Well, I think the president is very committed to getting this done, Brian, and so he's sitting down with lots of different folks, and I had the chance to sit down with him yesterday and kind of walk through where I think things are in the Senate, and also kind of what our vote count looks like. And so we've got, the president obviously is incredibly effective at bringing people on board to his position, and we need to have him fully engaged with senators as we go through the next few weeks in hopes that we get something across the finish line here in the Senate that the House can take up and pass and put on the president's desk by the 4th of July, which, as you know, has been the goal.
Right. So you said you want to tinker with the House bill. In what areas bother you the most? Or forget about John Thune, what bothers you, but what makes it hardest for you to pass it the most?
Well, I think, there are some significant differences, of course, as you know, between the House and the Senate and the way they view some of these issues. Of course, the SALT issue is something that is, the House has to address. Not an interest necessarily in the Senate. And by the way, for your listeners, that's the deduction for state and local taxes, which is a big issue in some of the, sort of the East Coast, West Coast states, but not so much anywhere else in the country, which is why it's not as big of an issue in the Senate. I think the question of whether some of the tax policies are made permanent as opposed to being 4 or 5 years, and permanence obviously creates economic certainty for investment, which drives job creation and ultimately generates more government revenue, not less, because when the economy is growing and expanding, people are investing, they're making money, taking realizations, and paying taxes. So I think that's one of the issues. And I would say on the spending side, too, we've got, as you know, a lot of our members who would like to see more in terms of spending cuts. But I think the House did a really nice job of finding areas where we can reform government, root out waste, fraud, and abuse, make our government operate more efficiently and effectively. And so the Senate wants to build on that. But, we have people who would like to go farther than the House did. But in the end, it's all about the math, and it's what gets us 51 in the Senate and what gets us 218 in the House.
Well, here's this whole thing. There's a couple of things that keep on permeating through. Number one, does it add to the deficit, and are you cutting Medicaid? Here's Rand Paul, Republican, cut 5.
The bill increases the debt ceiling by $5 trillion. This will be the largest increase in the debt ceiling ever in our history, and we've never raised the debt ceiling without actually meeting that target. So you can say it doesn't directly add to the debt, but if you increase the ceiling $5 trillion, you'll meet that. And what it does is it puts it off the back burner, and then we won't discuss it for a year or two. So I think it's a terrible idea to do this.
So, and the CBO says that you're going to add to the deficit. Your reaction? What's the reality as you see the math?
Well, I think that the CBO, and by the way, there's no question that the deficits are, and the debt is way too high. And the way to get that down is start bending the curve on spending, get greater growth in the economy. As I mentioned earlier, when you have growth in the economy, government revenues go up. And then if you start bending the spending curve down in the right direction, you can start getting to where it's closer to balance. But it's not going to, the question I think that your people want to know is, will it add to the deficit? We are running deficits, and the deficits right now are unacceptably high, but will this lead to higher deficits? And the answer to that is no. You're going to get growth in the economy. And when the economy, again, is growing and expanding, you get more government revenue. You add to that the almost $2 trillion in cuts that are in the bill, and you have the most significant reduction in spending and biggest amount of savings in history in this legislation. So, and if you look at CBO, Brian, in the past, they've been, they have a long history of just flat being wrong. Over the past 7 years, when they scored the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and the economy grew 5% more than what they projected. Revenues were $1.5 trillion higher than what they projected in 2017. And when the Democrats passed their so-called Inflation Reduction Act last year, CBO missed the mark on energy provisions by about 400%. I mean, these guys they are notorious for missing on these projections. One thing we do know is when we reduce taxes and cut regulations and have an abundant energy supply in this country, the economy grows and expands, and that's where you start seeing these deficits get a lot smaller by comparison.
So Josh Hawley, one of the people, says don't touch Medicaid, but you are looking to touch Medicaid in that no more illegal Medicaid for illegal immigrants, and twice a year, according to the House, you got to be checking eligibility. Are you cutting Medicaid?
Well, no. I mean, I think
because Ron Johnson wants you to, and Hawley doesn't.
And we are strengthening and reforming Medicaid. And I think to both of their points, that's what you want to do. You want people, there are people in this country who need the help, and those are the people that you want. You got pregnant moms and disabled and elderly and people who depend upon Medicaid, but you got a lot of people benefiting from Medicaid today, able-bodied adults. You've got a lot of illegals who are on Medicaid, have been added to the rolls by states around the country. And so I think what we're doing is making sure that Medicaid is there for the people it's designed to be there for, and rooting out the waste, fraud, and abuse from people who are taking advantage of it. But I think in the end, it's about making that Medicaid more effective and more efficient for those who need it. That's the bottom line, Brian. And so, our members are reacting, as you point out. We've got some on different sides of this issue, but at the end of the day, it's all about making this program stronger and the directing it to the people who it's supposed to help.
I just want you to hear what Elon said as he left the White House for now and left his Doge people behind.
So, I was disappointed to see the massive spending bill, frankly, which increases the budget deficit, not just decrease it, and undermines the work that the Doge team is doing.
So your thoughts?
Well, I mean, again, he's using the CBO numbers, and that's a static analysis. The CBO doesn't take into consideration that we have a dynamic economy, and that when you make adjustments in tax rates, for example, that you're going to get more growth and more revenue. So there are a lot of folks out there who are adopting that point of view, but it's built around projections that the CBO is making, which are based upon a static view of the economy. And so, I mean, I think at the end of the day, what Elon would like to see, and we want to see as well, is a government that works in a lot more efficient, effective way that's a better return to the American taxpayer.
Right.
And I think what you're going to get with this is, like I said, the biggest savings ever achieved in a piece of legislation passed by the Congress in history.
So you are the calmest guy anyone's going to ever meet in Washington, but the president's fed up with Rand Paul already. He put on Truth Social, Rand Paul has very little understanding of the BBB, especially the big, beautiful bill, the tremendous growth that is coming. He loves voting no on everything. He thinks it's good politics, but it's not. The BBB is a winner. He went under, so he is a little upset with him. Are you frustrated with Rand Paul? Is he rolling up his sleeves and trying to make it better, or just critical on the outside?
I would like to see, it'd be great if we could, I'd like to have all Republicans vote for this thing at the end, Brian. And as I mentioned, we have individual senators who have different views on these issues, and then they're in many cases they're thoughtful and well-informed. But at the end of the day, it becomes a question of whether or not this thing makes things better or worse. And I think what the president is arguing, and I agree, is that you start getting savings on the spending side, you start getting greater growth in the economy because of these good tax policies, which are pro-growth, And the combination of those things ends up making things much better for our country. And so the president would love to see the team stick together, and so would I, to put it bluntly. But I understand, sometimes you can't get everybody, but we've got to have 50. We got to get 50 plus JD in the chair to make this thing pass in the Senate.
Understood. And what you have to do, too, is figure out on the SALT. I mean, Mike Lawler says, I lose my seat if I don't get the SALT tax to where it is right now, as well as your New Jersey Republicans. And then others say, are you kidding me? We have 0% taxes for a reason. I'm not paying for New York. So I don't know if there's a happy medium there, if it goes back to the House and then it dies a slow death. These are types of things that you wanted this job, Leader Thune. So I want to talk about something else that could be working its way through the House, and that's a massive sanctions bill on Russia. Did you talk to the president about that yesterday? Because it's got over 80 votes. Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham kind of wrote it, I guess. Your thoughts about what's in it, and is the president for it?
Well, and we touched on it at the White House yesterday, and the White House is working with our team here on some refinements to it, I think, to make sure that from a technical standpoint it accomplishes what everybody wants to see accomplished. I think the answer to that, Brian, is the president. We're trying to give him as much space and room as necessary for him to try and negotiate the best possible outcome and get a peaceful solution in Ukraine. And if the sanctions contributes to that, then we're available and ready to move. So we're kind of looking to coordinate with and take direction from the White House about what gives them the best possible chance of succeeding in trying to get the the outcome that we want to see and that we want to achieve in Ukraine.
Did the president say yes? Go ahead and pass it.
I think I wouldn't say that he's there yet. I think that they're aware, obviously, that we have a bill and that we're ready to move. So we will. But I also know that the discussions and the conversations they're having with the Russians and with Ukraine are, we want to make sure that they have the best possible chance of getting a good outcome there, and we will contribute to and add to that if they think it's helpful. So we're ready to move. We'll look for a green light from them, and perhaps at some point we'll have it.
President Zelensky is asking for more Patriots. Is there another weapons sale to Ukraine, because they do have money? Is there a weapons sale possible, or do you see that as too big a hill to climb?
Well, I think that, if we can, sales, I think, are one thing. And I think that we want to do everything we can, along with our NATO allies and everybody around the world who wants to see the Russians, in this invasion of Ukraine dealt with in a way that deters that kind of bad behavior in the future. And so if we can sell weapon systems and the types of, I've always said, training, intelligence, weapons, anything we can do to help support those efforts there, we should do. I think it's in the end, it's in the world and the United States' interest to do so. I think there's a real concern in the country right now about, more American resources, tax dollars going in there. But if the Ukrainians are prepared to buy some of our weapon systems and we've got them and they can use them, then we certainly ought to do that.
So, Senator Thune, I understand the U.S. did not get a heads up on Operation Spiderweb that devastated the Russian Air Force, blew up at least 2 bridges, and derailed trains. And it was a brilliant operation by everything I read. It's a year and a half in the year plus in the making. Your thoughts about Operation Spiderweb?
Congrats to the Ukrainians. I mean, what a masterpiece. And the fact they were able to pull it off without anybody, for all intents and purposes, almost anybody around the world knowing what was going on, and the effect that it had, the impact, the destructive impact on Russia's war-making capability, I think, is remarkable. I mean, it truly is. You got to give them great credit, and I think what it suggests is the Ukrainians are much better prepared and equipped to defend their country and to fight for their country, men and women, than a lot of times I think the world gives them credit for.
Did the president respond to this at all? Because yesterday he was strangely quiet. I know he was busy with you guys and doing a lot of things behind the scenes.
Well, I think that, I'm not sure that I saw anything officially come out of the office either, but I think anything that enhances the possibility that we get closer to a peaceful outcome there is good. And it seems to me at least that Ukraine making it very clear to the world and to the Russians that there's a lot of fight left in them helps get people to the table. So I'm hoping that in the end it's an advantage for the President, the White House, and his team as they try and negotiate again, a successful and hopefully peaceful solution in Ukraine.
Senator, you're going to do a rescissions package of $9.8 billion for PBS, NPR, USAID. Is that expected this week?
Well, it's coming. We won't probably get it on the floor of the Senate this week. I think it's headed up here from the White House. I don't think we've received it yet, but the House will act on it first, and they'll probably send it over here. We're going to be very preoccupied over the next few weeks with the big beautiful bill with budget reconciliation. We've got a stable coin, a crypto bill on the floor this week and next, and possibly Russia sanctions, nominations. We've got a very full docket, but we are certainly, as soon as it is available and the House acts on it and sends it over here, we will move as quickly as we can. These rescissions bills are ways in which we can find additional savings, largely on the discretionary side of the budget. Reconciliation is about the mandatory side, and I know it's a distinction that's lost on people who don't follow this stuff closely, but there are two categories of spending, and rescissions deals with the one category and reconciliation with the other. And we want to make sure that we're moving on all fronts to reduce the size, the scope, and the largesse in our federal government and make it more efficient and more effective.
Senator Fetterman's indication he's fed up with the Democratic Party. Have you actively recruited him for the Republican Party?
Well, we've got people who are talking to him. I don't think at this point he's, and I can't speak for him, but I know, Brian, that there are overtures, obviously, that get made. And I think more than anything else, we just want him to know that he shouldn't let those guys get him down. I mean, he's under attack by his own side, by the far left in this country, and he's making some hard votes. And if he wants a place or a home in the Republican Party, I'll tell you what, we'll welcome him.
Will you try to recruit him for this bill?
We will we talked to him on a number of bills where we think he might see the world through the lens that we do, as opposed to the far left, the progressive wing of the Democrat Party, which is what's the tail wagging the dog in the Senate these days. And, he's a guy who's shown he can be a voice of reason on some issues like Israel, and obviously make votes that maybe aren't always, that sometimes may be at odds with his leadership, which I think his leadership is completely out of touch. I mean, this is a party in the Senate and in the House and across the country that really doesn't have. They're just right now really floundering, and I think that he understands that. He's articulated that, and I'm hoping that at some point he'll act on it.
10 seconds. July 3rd. Are you going to say this bill is passed?
That is my hope. So we will see. 51, my friend.
All right. That's all you need. Senator John Thune. And, of course, you pass it, then the House got to see if they still like it. Thanks so much, Majority Leader. We really appreciate it. Our audience really appreciates the insight.
Thanks, Brian. Good to be with you.
As do I. Back in a moment. Hey, we are back, and Governor Chris Sununu is here. He's got a brand new haircut. He looks in fighting weight. I don't know what's going on. Are you doing cross training?
I can afford a haircut now.
What are you doing?
I do double jabs. I do the fat shot. I do 6 of them a week.
6 of them a week?
Yeah, I don't know which brand to take, so I just take them all, and it seems to be working.
You just have, do you have your butler do that, or do you have to shoot yourself?
I'm working to a butler. I would love to have a butler. I want to be a snobby rich person someday. I'm not.
And not even have to talk to me.
I'm literally poor and doing my own floors, but I'm working my way to snobbery.
Well, here's the thing. Yeah, you're close. You're closer than you think. But especially, I watched you last night on CNN. I'm like, and you're just saying to yourself, why would I do that show?
Well, Abby Phillips is a great person. It's a very bickering type show. Yeah. It's not really, and so it brings out the worst.
I'm not great on it. What are we accomplishing?
Sure, Michael's great and Scott Jennings is great, but it brings out the worst in me because I get really frustrated on the show. So I always say I'm not going to do the show anymore. It just I get too angry, and then 2 weeks later I'm like, you know what? I can do better. Let me get back in there. Yeah. It's like,
well, it doesn't. And let's say I think you're better off here. So Senator Thune's got his hands full. He's got a month to pass this big, beautiful bill. And he says, I'm going to be working to fine-tune it. What would you change?
Look, I'm definitely more in the Rand Paul camp of things. That
it's 1,000 pages.
If you're not willing to make tough fiscal decisions now, then you're not giving this country any hope of having to do even the harder stuff down the road. And my message, look, I decided not to run for the Senate. One of the main reasons was I think I'd just be so frustrated there, right? As Rand Paul is. And so my message to Thune, and I think Thune's great, by the way. I think he's a nothing against Mitch McConnell, but the whole cast of characters there, McCormick, the car dealer from Ohio.
Moreno,
great guys, right? Katie Britt, terrific, new young generation of conservatives. Yeah. But they got to understand that our fiscal crisis is bigger than anything. If I were Thune, I would ask everyone to hedge to that side, because you have 4 or 5 that won't cut anything, 4 or 5 that want to cut more. I think that when in doubt, as a conservative, as a Republican that cares about the biggest issue, go for the cuts.
But number one, they're adding $140 billion to defense, right? Because does anyone think we don't have to start building up defense? Does anyone think we have enough ships? Does anyone think that we have modernized to effect?
Shipbuilding is going to be critical.
And you got to be same time reform the Pentagon in a way that we've never done it before. We only talk about it in terms of spending.
Look, I got.
And then the border. Those are the two.
The borders are the big one, and absolutely. But my argument with defense is this. We all know that it's one of the most inefficient, right? Every report says it's massively inefficient in terms of how we procure. I think you don't have to add the $140 billion. You can still do these new projects without losing a soldier, a bullet, anything. But it's so inefficient. Like, there's so much waste. My son is a Marine, on a crew chief on a helicopter. And when he talks about how much it costs just to replace washers, right, on one of their helicopters, it's outrageous. So there's procurement and things you can do just to get those costs in line, but still add the programs and have the defense that you need.
So when they do the math, the CBO says we project that the economy is going to grow 1.8%. And then would Bessent and others say, what decade have we grown at 1.8%? We've never had that little growth. They believe that we will grow our way out of it.
Yeah, CBO.
Do you not
I think
see
the
it that
CBO is
way?
wrong. I think we have much higher growth potential.
So wouldn't that change your math?
Absolutely. And again, that's why you don't have to cut the $2 trillion, right? There's a huge growth model here. The second quarter GDP numbers were phenomenal. They look to be phenomenal. They're like over 4% according to some predictions. So, and you're already seeing onshoring. Trump's onshoring plan of manufacturing. Some of the initial job numbers as of a week ago are already showing onshoring. It's not taking 2 or 3 years like we thought. It's already happening. That's really, really positive stuff. But I just go back to Senator Thune. If you're not willing to address Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security, I know those are the third rails. And I don't mean to pick on him directly, but Senator Hawley was like, to touch Medicaid is political suicide. Wrong. To make tough decisions gets rewarded. And I'm a governor. I was a governor for 4 terms and 8 years. And we cut taxes, we cut budgets, we made hard decisions. We were super transparent about it. We talked about it and made sure the constituents understood that our job was to manage their money. Our job was to manage their programs. And you can do it efficiently, but you can't do it by keep adding to the deficit.
So bring us back to Obama. Yeah. He has Obamacare, and he says, I'm going to give states billions of dollars to expand Medicaid. Now only, I think, between 10 and 20 states have said no. Why? Because they didn't want to get used to the federal money, because when the governors age out or the President Obama leaves, who's going to tell all my constituents that the federal money is dried up?
It's an addiction, right? We got addicted to the money, the 90% match, right? So expanded Medicaid is instead of 50-50, like traditional Medicaid, expanded Medicaid, 90% comes from the federal government, which is exactly
what was never the intent, right?
Never the intent.
It was supposed to be Medi-Cal, Medicaid was supposed to be state funded?
Yes.
Was there always
50,
federal
50.
subsidies?
It's always a 50-50 match.
So the federal government sustains it and expands it and says, don't worry, I'll give you the money.
That's right. So here's how you get out of it. And it's not about getting out of it. You don't just cut it off and go back to 50. Next year you go to 83%, and then 75, and then 65. And that way you're giving the states time to say, we need, the government's pulling 40 million out, we can put 40 million in. Allow states in their budget process to keep adding the dollars back in if they want. It's not about cutting SNAP benefits. People aren't going to die when you see these cuts in Medicaid, but again, allowing states more flexibility. I would do block grants. right? Why should the federal government tell me how much of my Medicaid dollars can go to SNAP? They limit that, actually, right? Or they say, this is how much you have for SNAP. Maybe I don't need that much for SNAP.
SNAP is a food stamp program.
Food stamp program, right? So let states decide what they need.
Right. So when they say, well, they're cutting SNAP, listen to Fetterman yesterday, and he's like, well, I don't think I'm going to go for the big, beautiful bill because they're cutting SNAP and cutting Medicaid. And I'm thinking to myself, not really.
No,
they're
not really at
SNAP.
all. Yeah.
They're to the chagrin of Ron Johnson and others and you, because he's not cutting it. He says illegal immigrants not going to get it. That's
right. And remember, SNAP and all these programs that were juiced up under Obama and Biden hugely. They're really ramped up well beyond, I don't want to say beyond the needs, but there are some states like for example, let's use New Hampshire. We have the lowest poverty rate in the country. We have huge needs. 10% have food insecurity. But our SNAP program is good. It's solid. They could probably use some of those dollars in other areas, but the federal government doesn't allow it. But if you gave us a ball of Medicaid money and said, here New Hampshire, here California, here Florida, you decide in your Medicaid population which of these individual programs need attention and which don't. And every state's going to be a little different. You can get rid of the bureaucracy. Here's one for you. I don't mean to get too wonky with your audience, but let's say within Medicaid, I want a certain drug to be approved because I have some people with some rare diseases. Do you know it takes like 2 years of bureaucratic nonsense in Washington, even though I run the program, to get that approved? Why are we doing that? Let states make their own choices. Let states have control. Cut billions out of the bureaucracy. Right. You create the efficiencies and ramp it down.
Here's what Rand Paul said, cut 11.
Well, the math doesn't really add up. One of the things this big and beautiful bill is it's a vehicle for increasing spending for the military and for the border. It's about $320 billion in new spending. To put that in perspective, that's more than all the DOGE cuts that we found so far. So the increase in spending put into this bill exceeds the DOGE cuts. When you look just at the border wall, they have $46.5 billion for the border wall. Well, the current estimate from the CBP is $6.5 million per mile. So if you did 1,000 miles, that's $6.5 billion. But they have $46 billion. So they've inflated the cost of the wall 8-fold. So there's a lot of new spending that has to be counteracted.
Well, I would love a further definition of that because I thought $2 billion was 25 miles.
Right.
That's what his last time.
Yeah, I don't think it's $6.5 million per mile. I don't know.
But by the way, if they're overestimating the wall, that's not something Republicans are looking to do. I mean, whether you're putting electronics on it, surveillance on it, things to that nature. But if you want to further define it, okay. Well, so the border's already closed without building the wall. So Rand Paul is in the ire of the president. He said this just now. Rand votes no on everything, but never has any practical or constructive ideas. His ideas are actually crazy, losers. These people of Kentucky can't stand him. This is a big growth bill.
Yeah, well, look, I'm not going to get between the president and Rand Paul. I'm really not. I do like the growth aspects of it. But, Rand said something else in that same interview. He talked about, and I don't know the exact numbers, that the amount of cuts we need amount to about 6 or 7% in virtually every program. So let's say you take every government program, you cut about 6 or 7%. In your home budget, if I said, look, you got a 10% reduction in your pay, so you got to cut 6, we could all find ways to do that.
Absolutely.
I'm just tired, and everyone in America should not put up with this idea that it can't be done. And again, I go back to Senator Hawley where he said it's political suicide. No, it's not. It's not
to cut Medicaid.
To cut anything. He said Medicaid, but that means they're not going to cut Medicare. That means they're not going to eventually deal with Social Security. Guys.
If you don't build Social Security, it goes bankrupt.
It goes bankrupt, as does Medicare, right? So what happens? We have to borrow more money to keep those programs going. Inflation gets skyrocketed. The dollar gets weaker. We're not the reserve currency. Go ask folks at BlackRock or Blackstone or KKR. They're investing in other currencies around the world, not because they don't believe in America, but because it just they're hedging their bets, right? The last group that had America as a AAA rated bond this last month, that's gone. Nobody rates us AAA anymore. Guys, this is reality. It is math. And I'm not trying to be so dire, but in the 8 to 10 years we have left here, before it all really crashes, someone's got to stand up and say, yes, Rand, we're willing to work with you and make some cuts.
This is a scenario I absolutely can see happening. You pass this bill, you do the tax relationships. We see what's happening with the Trump economy. We're going to find out. Everyone's like, there's so much unsettledness. Yeah, he's 11 weeks in. He's doing everything at once. Some people, no one's ever really done like what he has done. But we could say that about Trump every day. So the trade deals start coming in. The big, beautiful bill passes. Well, he's got 3 years left, three and a half years left. Can you go back in and just say we're going to be reforming Social Security? Can you go back in and say we're going to be focusing on Medicare now? And then a term-limited president could make some really courageous decisions and without hurting his party easier.
I think you've hit it right on the head. And if I were the president, this is what I would go to the fiscal conservatives. I'd say, look, give me what I need now. I know we're going to raise the debt ceiling and have to get through this now for that growth model. But along with that, para pursuit, I'm going to also say, we're going to do, where I'm going with this, a balanced budget amendment. Not tomorrow, but we're going to do an amendment that says within the next 5 years, we will achieve a balanced budget, and we're going to start on it today. You can put that action into law. Put those long-term guardrails, because that is what we're concerned about. We're not concerned about balancing the budget today. We're concerned about making sure it gets done before the crisis hits. So Congress does have the ability to pass a law, give them guardrails, and say, within the next 2 or 3 years, this is going to be addressed. And that way it's not politically scary for everybody. It gives times for this stuff to roll out, but it assures the American people that the value of their dollar is secure.
See, the one thing, I have no patience for Tom Massey and Rand Paul. I appreciate what they stand for, but you got to roll up your sleeves and just
you got to find
busy.
a middle ground. That's true. Yeah.
That's good work. Ron Johnson says, I want to see the president be successful. I don't like the bill.
Yeah.
But he's going to work. He's going to sit there in committee. He's going to hammer Josh Hawley personally and publicly, perhaps, and they're going to find something that works. Here's cut 10.
I think what is disappointing to me about the debate that went through the House, if you even call it that, we weren't looking at the facts and figures. The only figure we ever heard about was $1.5 trillion. Sounds like a lot, but when you put it in context of the $89 trillion we're going to spend over the next 20 years, the $22 trillion in additional deficit we're going to incur, that's $2.2 trillion per year deficit. I mean, it's completely unsustainable. I agree with Jamie Dimon here.
So that's his concern. We had Ray Dalio on last week, and he said the percentage of the debt, it needs to get at 3%. He goes, right now it's at 6 or 7%. Mm-hmm. So if you get it to 3, we're fine.
That's
but
right.
He goes, historically, empires collapse when it gets to above it.
That's exactly right. And so there's time. This is very doable. I would hope that they would grab the moment because the clock is ticking. You just can't keep kicking the can down the road. And again, to your exact point, find that middle ground. And I would ask Thune, and like I said, I respect the heck out of him. What can you give these guys with a little more of a long-term fiscal conservative guidepost to make them understand that, we're willing to meet us in the middle in the short term and I'll give you something in the long term. Where are those discussions? And again, to say, well, we're not going to talk about Social Security and Medicare, it's a disservice to the American people.
The president said that.
And I would say this.
He's trying to get elected.
The answer isn't we're going to reform Medicare. We're going to fix Medicare. We're not going to reform Social Security. We're going to fix it. Because as you know, when Social Security goes bankrupt, if you're on Social Security right now, you all lose 18% of your benefits. That's in law.
But do you know what we could do so easy with Social Security? And again, being a simple, not great at math, but understanding it. But for example, there's only a threshold that certain people pay into Social Security. And I reach, because I have a great job now, I didn't have one before, I reached my cap in like 4 months.
That's right. Yeah.
You could take more from me, other people
Absolutely.
Go 12 months and all of a sudden it balances out. You go up 1 year in age eligibility. All of a sudden it balances out. Give people a 62 option, but now you say there's an incentive to wait to 69.
Right. Or you move the cap. When you've made a certain amount of money, you're not getting as much. And by the way, wealthy people will be happy to give that up if it means security in the system.
More from Sununu in a moment, including that stunning attack from the Ukrainians inside Russia, in a way I didn't think was possible. Don't move.
And this is also a great strategic benefit for the United States, because those planes that were destroyed, Tu-22s, Tu-95s, are in fact nuclear-capable planes. They are used for Russian nuclear weapons, which are, first and foremost, targeting the United States or use against the United States. So we are safer from Russian nuclear strikes as a result of Ukraine's action.
John Herbst, former ambassador to Ukraine in Kyiv, talking to me yesterday and just saying that brilliant move to have these trucks and sheds open up and out come 117 minimum drones that derail trains, blow up bridges, and blow up dozens of aircraft and probably more. Governor Sununu is still with me. This is something for the ages.
It's huge. And it isn't huge that they did it. It's huge where they did it. They did 1,000 miles into Russia's interior. So it wasn't something just right over the border. They showed that they have reach, they have accuracy, they have capability. And again, I'm a big believer that you got to keep backing Ukraine to force Russia to the table because they've been unwilling to come. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. Well, but it's a great move.
With nothing's happening with the talks, the president said I'm giving it 2 weeks. How much more before the president just tells the Senate, go have at it? Because it's a veto-proof bill to sanction Russia.
So the sanctions would be great. But again, I think I think everyone's watching to see the president's next move here. Because he said, look, nothing's going to happen until Putin
Who would
and
you
I
like
can
to
talk. He's got to get more engaged. A conversation is one thing. This move by Ukraine, maybe there'd be a second move by Ukraine, a similar type move. Because what he's really trying to do is bring the Russian public into it, the Russian people into it, to put some more pressure on the Kremlin to end this thing. The sanctions hurt, definitely Russia, without a doubt. But when it hits your interior, when you see explosions in Russia and the Russian people are seeing that,
so I like to see him give more weapons.
Absolutely.
Because they
like
have
those
money.
Like those weapons, so they can hit a little deeper, a little firmer, and force Russia to the
But
table.
you don't have to give them drones, you give them steel. They know how to make it themselves. So now you give them Patriots, and you maybe more
if they're made in
ATACMS,
America, I have no problem giving them weapons if they're made in America.
How about Germany's new attitude? They're going to spend 5%. The chancellor's coming Thursday, and they're going to start giving permission to use our weapons deeper into Russia.
Would that be happening if Trump wasn't elected?
Not
No,
a chance.
Not at all. So, I mean, that's where Trump, I think, really deserves a lot of credit. What he's done to Europe, I don't want to say bringing them to heel, but I'll call it inspiring them to do the right thing, back their own play, because it's their neighborhood. And again, they're talking about 5%. As long as they actually commit to it in Germany, that would lead the rest of Europe.
The last thing was, you can never trust Iran. They've been a bad actor since '79, since your dad was in office. This has to end.
Until women are wearing mini skirts again in Iran, I trust nothing with those goofballs.
Thanks, Governor.